people say stuff that everybody else knows because that's the safe thing to say. You're not going to get laughed at or even just looked weirdly at if you say a known fact. Now, unfortunately, that doesn't help the team.
Hey podcast fam, it's your go-to leadership team coach and host, Jessy here, and I'm ready to shake things up. If you're also tired of outdated forms of authority and ready to rebel against the mediocrity of leadership we see today, you might have just found your spot. So join me in unleashing this next generation of leaders by embracing being just a bit too millennial. Let's redefine this thing together. So today I have the pleasure of welcoming Katerina, a behavioral data scientist, an educator, someone who works with startups, and just basically one of the most intellectually curious people I know, to this episode. As we've talked about this season, we're really exploring disruption, how leaders, organizations, and systems are being challenged, are being reinvented. And Katerina is probably the perfect guest to have on for this specific purpose, because basically everything she does is really about disrupting traditional ways of thinking, working, and living, really living. Funny story to give you a little sense of Katerina and her style. I send a survey out to my guests before the show, and the first question is, how do you want me to introduce you? Because even if I have someone's LinkedIn background or if I know someone and all their achievements, I'm not quite sure how they want me to frame them as a guest. And in the most Katerina way, she just wrote Katerina. No middle last name, just Katerina. It just made me chuckle and laugh. I thought it was perfect. I think that tells you what you need to know. Katerina can be overtly direct and very literal. A little bit about how I know Katerina. We first met because she was my capstone advisor during my graduate program, and she was teaching this infamously difficult course in the program that I 150% avoided. Like, I don't know if they could have paid me to take this course. And so when she turned out that she was my advisor for my capstone, I was concerned because I knew about her strong quantitative approach, and I was intimidated by how that might show up in terms of how I brought my capstone. And I will be honest, it probably wasn't as smooth at first because our interest, research styles, and communication approaches are so different. But it was once we actually got into a relationship, there was like a spark every time we conversed, every time we had a discussion. There was just this energy there that made my thinking sharper, which I really, really appreciated. And I think having someone that you are concerned about that thinks differently from you come in and being able to really connect with that person and see the value in their thinking changes how you see yourself, how you see collaboration and working together. And that's what she was able to do for me at that moment of time, is realize I can work with someone who's really quantitative, who has this specific style. And I love it. We also then, after that, we worked and collaborated together on a project that examined team dynamics through this lens of anti-racism. And so I got to know her better during that time. And one of the reasons she's here is because Katerina has this rare ability to take really dense behavioral data, patterns that I tend to run from, quantitative data. She translates that into insights that genuinely change how people learn, collaborate, and make decisions. In fact, her doctoral research was on how individual behaviors, dyadic relationships, and network level factors shape information exchange and collaboration in teams. So again, she has this really rigorous, reason I explain this, it sounds like giggly gloop to me, but she's a really rigorous foundation in a lot of these forces that drive group performance. And what she tries to do is she tries to take the invisible forces and really make them visible through data. So today, because of her work, sits at this intersection of kind of this future of work. We talk about how potentially you might lead in these futuristic organizational structures. So we We talk a little bit about DAOs, and DAOs are decentralized autonomous organizations. I'm still confused about DAOs, so if you are after this podcast, that's okay. What these things are is they're essentially organizations that are not run by hierarchy, but they're like a collective group where decisions and authority are really, really distributed among members. We also talk about social network analysis, which is the class that she teaches that I never took. So, yeah. But anyways, social network analysis basically maps how information, influence, and collaboration actually flows inside organizations. So really, it's trying to turn these like kind of invisible collaborative partners, who talks to who influences who, how information flows within a full organization. It tries to visually show that. Again, who holds that invisible glue that keeps organizations functioning. And then towards the end, we do talk a little bit about boundary spanning, and I wish we could have gotten a little bit more into that. But really, this is an increasingly critical leadership capability that's all about how do you connect across roles, across teams, across cultures and perspectives. And this really sits at the heart of modern leadership. Katerina embodies all of these things perfectly. She lives and works across cultures. She now resides on a small island in Gran Canaria with her children. And she's always trying to do the new thing, to experiment in the new way, not from just an intellectual level. Yes, she has the intellectual rigor, but then she actually goes out and does it. So as we typically do, let's just dive right in.
On a specific social network, I posted a question where people can do a prediction, and the two options were: what is more likely, war in the European Union with Russia, or civil war in the US? And the most likely option is civil war in the US in the next 12 months. So what is your idea on that?
I love that question because it's very relevant, because today I was actually on ice patrol for my school. So the threat is very real to our community members. Do I think we'll be in civil war, though? I don't know. I do think that the Russia bit is probably more likely. Where are you at?
Yeah. So winter is coming soon, and in the way warfare was done in the past, doing it in the winter in Russia is just very bad timing for everybody. And maybe the Russians are better equipped in fighting during a Russian winter than, let's say, the Germans or the Polish people. The European Union in the past is very good at talking, but not at biting. It's like a dog that barks, but never bites. And I think this has created problems inside the European Union with certain countries who should have been punished because they moved further and further away from European values, and nothing has been done. Now, putting these two together, I see war in Europe developing slower than civil war in the US.
Okay.
There are characters in the US who, things can very easily get misunderstood, taken out of context, and maybe it will not be a full large-scale civil war throughout the whole of Europe, but military shooting civilians or military shooting guerrilla groups within a large metropolitan city in the US, why not?
Being on an island, do you get insulated from a lot of these pieces of stress?
It feels unreal. The cognitive dissonance I had when the Ukraine war started. I was walking along the beach, it was sunny, kind of feet in the water, and I was talking with my friend who is from Poland, lives in Ireland, and she is talking about the Ukrainian refugees that they are taken in because, Ireland is kind of nearer to Ukraine than Gran Canaria. And it just felt completely weird. We do have NATO based here. It is a strategic position between Africa, Europe, and Latin America. And the real threat here is water shortage. So I've talked about that with friends. What will you do? Will you be moving back to Germany? No way. We are completely the food supply chain, we're completely dependent on ships traveling. If there's an oil crisis, there are no ships, the supermarkets will be empty. Like I remember first day of COVID lockdown, going into the supermarket and everything being empty. What I've experienced here quite often is that, this bad weather and the ship takes a day longer and there are no onions. Or we once had 3 months without peanut butter. We didn't order enough. We had more British tourists coming, buying all the peanut butter. And because the way the system works so slow, the next load of peanut butter came later, and then I had one kid who didn't want to eat anything anymore because there was no peanut butter. But yes, we are insulated from the kind of what happens at the global, on the global level. War in Europe will impact us in terms of food supply and water supply.
I think a lot of times we think of leadership in terms of roles, the reporting lines, but you look at it more from like a social network perspective. So let's say I'm a leader and I don't know anything about kind of the social network. How would you want to explain the relevance and the importance of understanding?
For me, the basis is that as a human being, in order for you to make a decision, even the decision what you're going to eat for dinner, you need information. And this information might be in your head. Let's say, I like deep fried burgers with chips and a ton of ketchup. So that's one set of information. And then you have people who can give you information. For example, your partner who says, I like you to live long. Can we have salad instead of the fries? And in a team level, this also happens. So for a team to take the best decisions, they need to talk with each other. And by talking with each other, that's actually the network. And now bringing this to the leadership, again, for a leader to take the best decision, they need to have information. And this information normally comes from the people around them who ideally give the leader the most accurate information that they have. So then, if I want to give you accurate information, I need to be able to trust that you will be using this information, that I will not get in danger if I give you this information, that you will not laugh at me when I tell you that, and so on. All these things happening in that network, that the leader needs, that information is then incorporated in decisions and in behavior. And that's kind of what a social network is. One thing that I often say, information is like a virus and it travels. And so whenever I start speaking or whenever you post something on social media, it is out and it's infecting, so to speak, everybody. And it can be a good virus or a bad virus.
I've seen a lot of situations leaders actually have trouble receiving information from their team. What do you tell those leaders?
I don't know if it's fear towards the leader getting the right information. And I'm not saying fear about being punished, but there is something strong about social identity. When the information is only in your head, a lot of humans think about, if I say it out loud, will I be laughed at, yes or no? Will I be excluded from my favorite group, for example? Or will I be accepted in my neighborhood or whatever if I say this, or if I dress in a specific way? So humans are evaluating, if before they're saying something, how harmful this is for themselves. And often I think in a team context, what happens, and there's scientific evidence for that, is that people say stuff that everybody else knows because that's the safe thing to say. Like, you're not going to get laughed at or even just looked weirdly at if you say a known fact. Now, unfortunately, that doesn't help the team. The team actually needs to hear, or the leader needs to hear things that nobody else knows, because only then you can innovate, you get new perspectives and so on. I don't think there's any way around the way we currently trained ourselves to behave, except for having some anonymous way for information to be posted, or like a third, fourth party, so that the information can travel via safe routes to the leader. If a leader recognizes that they don't get the information that they need, maybe they need to have not stakeholders, but kind of accepted that they're not the right receiver and that the team members prefer to talk to somebody else and that they're just going to have to get the information second or third.
if like people don't come to me with information, it's my fault. I'm doing something wrong. But I think that there's this like reverse thing that happens when we blame ourselves. And I don't think it actually gives us what we need for those people to be comfortable. I don't think self-blame really does much.
Yeah, I agree. Self blame doesn't help, and it's of course not always the person or always the leader. Um, I would question if the leader actually needs that information. Maybe they don't get it because the person made the decision. You don't need that information. It doesn't help you do your job. I gave the information to the person who actually needs it for the day-to-day job. And recognizing this, there's this idea around humble leadership that if you're clear and you clearly voice to your team that, well, you don't know everything, but yes, but you can. I think as a leader, you need to be able to connect the right people to talk with each other, and be
So it's even
second in line.
rethinking your role as a leader, as not necessarily the person that the information flows up to. So I guess when we think about kind of mapping your team network and how do we think about information flowing and how information best flows and decisions get made, how do you help people do that?
So we asked the leaders, like, who do you go to when you talk about a strategy or work related stuff, so that they get a picture about, okay, these are the ones that I talk to often, but they only help me for, let's say, innovative ideas. So these are the people who I talk to, let's say, every day, but actually don't get anything out of it. And then what we try to do with them is like kind of the next step. It's like, okay, if you're talking to 3 people, do these 3 people also talk among each other? Because then you get, you kind of get cliques. And if as a leader you want to have a good understanding of what is happening in your team, let's say you have 50 people working for you, you can't be talking with 50 people, but you can be talking with one person in each clique. So you need to figure out different levels. The same for when you're thinking about the next level, like you have your subordinates, and there you need to have key influencer that are positioned in a way, they're in a central, like we call it, that they're positioned in a central way. So if you have a clique, just imagine your typical high school clique in the US. You have the central person. That person knows what is happening. You need to talk with that person. And then you have your peer level, where ideally you have connections with everybody, I mean, depending on size and stuff like that. And then you have the next level, where you need to consider, what type of bridges do I need to build in order to have a quick enough connection to the highest level? You want to have different people who can tell you the same thing, or who can tell you similar stories, or know that they exist, because people get sick. People just leave. And if you only have one contact person between you and the CEO, or between you and customer support, if that one link leaves, then you suddenly cut off from customer support. And then how are you then get information what the customer really wants, because you don't know anybody else who's talking with customer support. So then you have to start again figuring out, okay, who can actually provide that best link.
I think that leaders think they should be the one giving the information, maybe, versus in reality they should be searching for information. Or it's a two-way thing where they're getting information from lots of different places and then they're able to communicate out to like a broader team.
I think a leader who believes that they should be getting everything needs to have a very good time management, because they can quickly be the bottleneck, because if everything has to come to you and then you have to make the decision, then you're the weakest link. Especially when we're thinking about leader and the people below the leader, good leader is able to create connections between the people below, saying you two should be talking because, I don't know, you do customer support, you're working on the front end. Why are you two not talking? Like, why do I need to know where the user is clicking? Let's just say, as an example, as a leader, I don't need to know the clicks.
So you've worked a lot in like these decentralized, what are DAOs? What are the decentralized, what is it?
Decentralized autonomous organization.
So I don't think anyone listening to this podcast was that probably that interested in being part of a DAO, but what could they learn about being a part of like a highly decentralized organization?
If you want to be efficient, I'll say DAOs are not the way to go, because it's a lot about communication, understanding the needs of the other person, thrown in with all the baggage every person carries around when they're joining a workspace. Because we're not empty pages, we kind of have our own struggles and then have to work with them. So that is the keyword of DAOs. I do think that the combination between DAOs and anonymous voting can help with getting more information. For example, let's say who should be the next leader, who should be promoted, something like that. If you ask that face-to-face to people, you'll get certain answers that are socially acceptable. And if you ask the question anonymous, you're going to get different answers. And maybe those different answers are more accurate to reality. Anyway, you get different type of information. So that's one aspect of DAOs that I think is beneficial for any type of organization. It's a very flat hierarchy. And what I've noticed over the years is that most people, even when they come directly out of university and have not been trained to work in a normal hierarchical organization, they struggle with that. For example, for a long time, we had a system where we vote on each other's salary, which gets then tricky when I reject your salary and then you get the right to defend your position, but you don't have to, like, how much of your private life are you gonna reveal to argue why you should get that salary that you wanted to say? So that's one thing that people are just not comfortable with that. The other thing we tried with is that at the end of every month, we distributed points based on how much you added, how much value you brought to the company. So, and what we noticed quickly is that the points correlated with hours. So kind of mostly like you had 10 points and people gave the points evenly across everybody because everybody was working full time. So why should somebody get less points if they worked full time? And kind of changing the mindset about kind of like, no, we're not looking at hours worked, we're really looking at value that you provided. And then, okay, like an engineer provides a certain amount of value, but social media posting is also value, kind of, and then you had to juggle these two different mindsets. And I think these are the more difficult aspects of a completely flat hierarchy. So these are difficult to implement in any organization.
Let's say you are going to write an article on the 5 best ways to, I don't know, take what you learn from a DAO and apply it to corporate America. What would your 5 points be?
So, point 1, delegation and making tasks small and then writing out the tasks. And that opens up the opportunity for more task sharing, a more flexible type of working, because there's a task. On Monday, I see there's a task to write an article. I normally do customer support, for example, but I really want to write on this topic. Say, I'm doing this task. This task gets me 100 points, which later on I can convert to dollars, for example. So certain DAOs had these task board. They were really public. So everybody could just say, I'm doing this. And then you had to do this in a certain time frame. And now there's tons of problems with the system also. But it was kind of opening up the company and the work the company is doing to everybody. That's kind of my main thing. I find the ideas around voting on salaries and voting on distributing points based on value interesting. But I do think it's something that will take 10, 15 years before people are actually comfortable doing this, because it goes back to how the educational system is set up. The completely second point, having a completely open treasury. Every DAO has a treasury that is and you can check out how the money is spent on that treasury on our website. So that kind of creates a lot of financial transparency, which then comes together with kind of like you have to argue about why you want to spend on that. But I think it creates a certain level of trust also between, let's say, customers and employees and the company, because you can see where the money goes. Another advantage of DAOs is that they're normally remote, so they normally, at least in my area, work was done async, which means you needed to be very good at communication, at written communication. And I think the advantage of having a lot of communication in writing is that you can check back what somebody said, yes or no, and that you yourself can review what you said before you hit post. Because everything is written, it stays forever, pros and cons again, but you can look it up and you can think before you post. And I'll end the article there with 3 big points to consider for the future of America corporation.
I find your interests very, like, you're interested in what? AI, DAOs, Web3, social network analysis. Like, what ties this all together?
Good question. The easy answer would be kind of like shiny object syndrome. So Web3 I really started because I found the idea of putting strangers in a group and making them work together interesting. Like, because if the group is not working, there's no money coming in, and then so it needs to work, and it needs to work without a formal leader, because everybody is a leader and nobody is a leader, which is different and then DAOs, there's a network. So if for DAOs to work, they need efficient information sharing, which is the social network. AI is it's a fancy new technology. I do think, yes, this is one thing that interests me about it. I think any algorithm that we have needs to include noise. If you look at the recommender engine on Amazon or kind of social media posts, they're all in such a way that there is no noise. It's kind of like you get more and more of the stuff that you liked before, because from a company perspective, if I give you something to eat that you don't like or that you might not like, then you will not come back. But you never know if you liked it, if you would like it, because you have never been there. So you should try the restaurant. But anyway, so that's why like social media is very much kind of giving you more and more of what you've seen before. AI has the same thing, because AI is just predicting the next word based on all the text that they're having. So technology that we're using day to day reduces more and more of the noise, which means we're all becoming more and more the same. And then, of course, we can add the challenges that if you speak a language that is not famous, kind of like dying languages where they don't have written text, AI accelerates or can accelerate that these languages die, because there's no way to train the machine on that. Facial recognition is still worse for Latin Americans than for white people, simply because of the training data. So something that ties it all together.
I do think that, like, from a millennial leadership perspective, like, they don't want to be like authoritative in their leadership style. And I think people think about the world in a more decentralized way. It'll be less command and control. But one is that, do you think that's true? And two, like, then what do these leaders need to know about decentralized leadership? I do love how you said, if everyone's a leader, is anyone a leader? Because that is like a question I posed to myself. Like, I do think in organizations right now, they're like teaching everyone here can be a leader. But then I'm like, wait, so if everyone's a leader, is anyone a leader? So lots of just mishmash, Jessy's brain thrown at you.
Yeah. I think with leadership comes responsibility. And the true leader in a group is the one who's then also willing to say, okay, my head is on the line if this goes wrong. I mean, of course, we could move to a system where, let's say, if a company gets hacked, it's not the CEO who is in trouble, it's the whole company, and we're just going to fire everybody because nobody is a leader, so everybody is a leader, so what's the fault for everybody? But I don't know if this is a workable system. I do agree with you that there is at least the stated preference that leadership should be decentralized or more shared. I do think it is the easiest way to distribute leadership is to say, well, you are an expert in this area. You are going to lead this. So, for example, let's say company of 10, engineering team of 5. One person is clearly knows more than other people than other team members about AI. They are leading all the decisions on AI. And if something goes wrong in that area, it's their fault and not the tech lead's fault. So in this way, there's shared leadership and there is distributed leadership, distributed responsibility. But if we're not thinking about reward and punishment, there's one person who you can turn to.
Okay. So when we think about, decentralized leadership or shared leadership, it's less of it's not that there's no leadership. It's just that leadership is based on specific competencies of each piece, and it gets distributed throughout based on the piece that person represents.
Yes, that's the ideal way. I think it gets harder when you have loud or charismatic voices. I think distributing leadership at the expertise level is the cleanest way. In social settings, what happens is that the most loud or the most charismatic person just falls into a leadership position, which you see among kids or teenagers. Like it's human beings.
My daughter, she's not happy about it. We tend to be the salmons that swim the other way. So we're always swimming against the, we're not, people don't follow us. We're usually, going the other way from the leaders. Is how I see myself, which I guess is leadership in and of itself, always swimming upstream. But would you call someone who swims upstream a leader? I always actually ask this to myself. Like, am I a leader? Because I am someone that tends to swim upstream. Are the people that swim upstream leaders?
Leadership would be defined by the size of your followership. You can't be a leader if you don't have people following you. Like, if you don't have followers, you're just that crazy person's swimming upstream or swimming upstream. Okay. What could happen is that your followers, like you swim upstream, there's 0 followers. 5 years later, there are 10 people following you or following in your footsteps.
That tends to be what happens to me.
So this kind of like
I'm kind of alone at first, and then like you look back later, and I'm like, look at all those people that like also swam upstream. That's amazing. But like, you don't ever get recognized for that, or no one ever points to you and says, "Oh, you're the first one to do it."
Yeah. I don't know. You're a pioneer then, and not a leader. Or
I'm a pioneer. Oh, interesting.
You're a pioneer. Yes.
I'm more of a pioneer than a leader. Okay.
Your followers are kind of delayed, or maybe they're kind of slow. Maybe you're going too fast for the world.
There might be value to causing the stir because you get the attention. This is just where the world works, where you do need someone to kind of light the fire, and then maybe there's someone who does have more of those typical charismatic leadership qualities that will come in and pull people along.
I don't know if it matters. Maybe it matters for you. I do think that people like you are needed in the world. Maybe you need to find, like before I talked about social networks and kind of second degree people as leaders. It sounds like you have information about what is happening upstream and you cannot get other people to follow you, but you need to find the person that's kind of between you and the followers who can soften the blow, as you said. So.
Yeah. I think I tend to come on a bit strong, which can turn people off, and then you need the softener. But if I was just soft, I feel like maybe it wouldn't cause so much discomfort. And I think it's the discomfort that gets people to start changing their mind. So I do feel like I bring true discomfort to people, which is necessary. So if I soften the blow, people wouldn't feel uncomfortable, and then they wouldn't be pushed to change?
It sounds like you softening the blow is not something that is in line with who you are. But like at the beginning, I talked about social identity a bit. So it's kind of like the clique, and there's one person in the clique that represents the group very well. And potentially what is happening is that there is a disconnect between you and your potential followers, that you are swimming upstream, and then maybe you dress differently, you talk differently, you drink differently, like you're just too different from the next group. So you need to find, or become best friend with the most central person in that clique. Because if the central person changes, like Mean Girls, if that blonde thing, that one that started it, the
Regina George.
Yes, if she suddenly wears black, everybody else would wear black because she's the central person in the Mean Girls group. So you need to find your Regina, blah, 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 in the groups that should be your followers. And then if you convince them to follow you, the rest will follow. That's kind of like...
Yeah, I'm more of the person that stands up to Regina George, and I'm like, dude, you kind of suck.
Yes, but she could sometimes... Yeah, I agree with that, especially in Cinderella. You need her to do the stuff that you want to do, so you need to be a bit nicer to only her, or kind of just convince her, because you need the central person to convince the rest of the group.
Okay, so I need to be nicer to the central. I tend to be a boundary spanner, and I actually think boundary spanning is a beautiful concept that people ignore.
But I think it's very, very difficult because you're constantly translating between different groups. You're constantly thinking, what do they need? What do the other group need? How can they better work together? Because they don't want... Yeah, it's a challenge because they're like here, and you're like kind of they're like separated, and you're trying to bring them together, but they don't know about each other, or they don't want to work together. So how... You need to figure out what is that one thing that kind of makes them overlap. Like, oh yeah, cool that you exist too. Now we can do, I don't know, have potlucks together.
Is that the one, like, what's the one thing you wish leaders knew about from your line of work that, like, they just don't know? They don't know. I feel like that's...
Connect people.
Connect people. Okay. Connect people. I love that. Yeah. Connect people. Stop trying to have all the answers. Start connecting people to the people who have the answers. I love it. All right. Any last words? How are you feeling about the podcast?
Good. It was a very good conversation.
I loved it. It was so fun. I always love talking to you. Yeah. I like how your brain works. I think I like how your brain works is so different from mine.
We're both swimming upstream on different rivers.
That's a wrap for today's episode of Too Millennial. If you're feeling inspired, hit that subscribe button and follow me on your favorite social media. Thanks for tuning in. Stay curious, stay bold, and keep disrupting.